Imagine a tough-weathered sea captain who spends his days on the open seas but his nights secretly visiting a children's hospital. He sits with sick kids, sharing stories, holding hands and giving them hope. No one knows why or who he really is until a school mutiny erupts. Students rebel against harsh rules, and the man who steps in to lead with calm authority is none other than Captain Jack Hadid. His secret kindness toward sick children fueled this real-life school mutiny. This is the untold story of Captain Jack's hidden compassion and the rebellion that revealed it all, based on exclusive interviews with the kids he helped and the teachers who lived through every moment of the uprising. The salty wind still clung to his coat as Captain Jack stepped off the docks that evening in late 2025. Most folks thought he was just another retired mariner hauling stories from distant ports, but the truth ran deeper. For years under the cover of night, he traded the rolling waves for the quiet hum of hospital corridors. Not some fancy celebrity visit with cameras flashing. No, this was different. This was personal and hidden. He slipped into the children's oncology ward dressed in his weathered tricorn hat, eye patch, and that signature swagger that made even the sickest kids crack a smile. He never announced himself, never asked for thanks. He just showed up with pockets full of small treasures, chocolate coins, plastic compasses, and tales that turned sterile rooms into pirate ships sailing toward treasure islands. One night in particular sticks out from interviews with the nurses who worked those shifts. A boy named Alex, no older than 8, lay hooked to machines, his body fighting leukemia with everything that had left. The doctors had given grim updates. That weak family gathered close, but hope felt thin. Then around midnight the door creaked open and there he was, Captain Jack, moving slow like he had all the time in the world. He pulled up a stool beside Alex's bed, lowered his voice to that gravelly drawl and began. "Savvy lad, you look like you've seen a storm or two. Ever hear about the ghost ship that sails only when the moon turns blood red?" Alex's eyes widened despite the pain. For the next 2 hours Captain Jack spun yarns about cursed gold buried on forgotten atolls, sea monsters that guarded sunken cities, and clever escapes from the King's Navy. He did not sugarcoat the hard parts of life. He wove them into the stories, showing how even the smallest pirate could outwit the biggest foe. Alex left that night, a real belly laugh, the first in weeks. The monitors beeped a little steadier. When the boy finally drifted off, Captain Jack stayed a bit longer, just holding the small hand until the breathing evened out. A nurse later told us in her own words he never once mentioned who he was outside those walls. He just said, "Call me Jack," and left as quietly as he came. But that wasn't a one-off. Week after week, month after month, he returned. Different kids, different battles. There was little Mia battling a rare brain tumor, who loved drawing maps. He brought her blank parchment and together they charted imaginary voyages, marking X where the strongest medicine waited. Or Tommy, the teenager who pretended he was too old for stories but listened anyway when Captain Jack talked about loyalty among crewmates, how you never abandon ship no matter the odds. These visits built something invisible but unbreakable. The kids started calling him their secret captain. Parents whispered about the mysterious man who lifted spirits without fanfare. Hospital staff noticed patterns of fewer calls for extra pain meds on nights he appeared, smiles lingering longer into morning rounds. One doctor shared off record that the presence of genuine joy, even for a few hours, seemed to bolster immune responses in ways medicine couldn't fully explain. It wasn't magic, it was a connection between raw and real in a place where fear often won. Captain Jack kept his land life separate. By day he worked odd jobs around the harbor, fixing boats, teaching sailing basics to local kids who could pay. He lived simple in a small cottage overlooking the bay, books of old sea charts lining the walls. No social media, no interviews, nothing to draw attention. He believed kindness worked best when it stayed quiet, unclaimed by headlines. But secrets like that don't stay buried forever, especially when children are involved. Things shifted when whispers from the hospital reached the nearby Riverside Middle School. Some of the kids there had siblings or cousins in that very ward. They heard the stories, not the polished ones, but the real raw accounts of how one man showed up again and again with no strings attached. It planted seeds. At the same time, the school itself faced growing unrest. Strict new rules rolled out overnight: no phones during breaks, mandatory uniforms, even for harsher punishments for minor infractions like tardiness or talking in halls. Students felt crushed, creativity stifled, voices silenced. Teachers were stretched thin, administrators distant. Frustration simmered, turning into quiet rebellion. Small acts of defiance like wearing mismatched socks or slipping notes under doors. Then came the spark. During lunch one Friday, a group of 8th graders gathered in the courtyard. One girl, whose little brother fought the same fight as Alex, spoke up. She described Captain Jack not by name but as the pirate who visits sick kids and makes them feel like heroes instead of patients. She said, if someone like that can sail into a storm to help strangers, why can't we stand up when our own ship is sinking right here? The words hit hard. Others chimed in, sharing their own burdens, family struggles, bullying, pressure to perform perfectly. By the end of lunch, a plan formed: not violence, no destruction, just a unified stand. They would mutiny peacefully and refuse to follow the harshest rules until someone listened. Word spread fast through texts, group chats, whispers in class. By Monday morning, the courtyard filled not with the usual scattered groups but with hundreds of students standing shoulder to shoulder, signs handmade reading fairness not fear, hear our voices, let us breathe. No shouting, just calm, determined presence. Teachers froze, administrators scrambled to call, parents, police arrived but stayed back watching. The kids didn't budge. They sang sea shanties softly, ones about rising together against unfair captains. It felt poetic, almost like the hospital stories had leaked into the school, turning fiction into fuel. At the center of it all stood a quiet figure who arrived unannounced. He wore the full coat, tricorn low over his eyes. The students parted as he walked through. He didn't yell or demand attention. He simply raised a hand and the singing stopped. In the gravelly voice he spoke. Lads and lasses, I've sailed rough waters, seen crews break and crews hold fast. A true mutiny isn't about chaos, it's about claiming what's right when the rules turn cruel. But hear this, the best victories come not from fighting blind but from standing tall together with hearts open. You've got fire in you. Use it wise. The crowd listened rapt. He shared no grand speech, just stories, short, sharp ones about loyalty, fairness, how even the saltiest pirate knows when to listen to the crew. Then he turned to the administrators who had gathered at the edges. He addressed them directly, calm but firm. These young ones aren't enemies, they're your future. Treat them like crew, not cargo, and you'll find smoother sailing. The principal stepped forward, hesitant, but something in Captain Jack's steady gaze shifted the air. Conversations started right there on the spot, open dialogue instead of standoff. By afternoon, agreements took shape. Relaxed rules on breaks promised student council input, clearer communication. The mutiny did not end in arrests or expulsions. It ended in real, measurable listening. As the crowd dispersed, Captain Jack slipped away the same way he came, with no fanfare or photos. But the kids knew. They connected the dots. The same man who held hands in hospital beds now stood with them in the schoolyard. His secret kindness had rippled outward, turning private compassion into public courage. Back at the hospital that evening, nurses noticed something new. Kids who'd heard about the school event buzzed with excitement. Alex, now stronger after months of treatment, grinned wide. He told his nurse, our captain didn't just visit us, he helped the whole school too. The word spread further, parents thanked him quietly, staff marveled at the invisible threads he wove. Captain Jack never saw credit, he just kept showing up, one night, one story, one hand held at a time. Yet the school mutiny marked a turning point. What started as hidden acts of grace now carried weight in the open. Students began volunteer groups visiting the ward themselves, reading to younger patients, sharing art and singing songs. The hospital felt less lonely and the school less rigid. Captain Jack watched from the shadows, a small smile under the eye patch. He knew the sea teaches one truth above all: change comes not from force but from steady, unwavering kindness, even when no one watches. The ripples kept spreading. Teachers who once enforced rules without question now paused and asked why they invited input. Parents who felt helpless saw their children empowered. And in the quiet hours when the hospital lights dimmed, Captain Jack returned again and again, because some voyages never truly end, they just sail on, carrying hope to the next horizon. This wasn't about one man being a hero, it was about what happens when compassion meets courage, when a single quiet act inspires hundreds to stand taller. The kids learned that kindness isn't weak, it's the strongest wind in any sail. And Captain Jack, well, he kept his secrets closed but his heart open, ready for whatever storm came next. Days after the courtyard standoff felt different everywhere, not just at the school but back in the quiet corners of the hospital too. Kids who once stared at blank ceilings now traded stories like trading cards. Did you hear our captain stood in the middle of the whole school? One girl whispered to her roommate during chemo. He didn't even raise his voice, just talked like he was telling us bedtime stories on deck. The roommate nodded, eyes bright despite the drip. Yeah, and they actually changed the rules because of him. Because of us listening to him. Captain Jack didn't stop coming. If anything, he showed up more often, almost every other night now, carrying the same battered leather satchel stuffed with the usual contraband, small compasses glow in the dark, stars, folded paper boats, tiny flags on toothpicks. He never mentioned the mutiny directly unless a child brought it up first. When they did, he listened more than he spoke, letting them tell their version of events the way they saw it, the fear, the excitement the moment the singing started. He treated their account as seriously as any captain's log. One evening he walked into room 412 where a new patient, a 7-year-old named Zara, had arrived only that afternoon. She was terrified, silent, clutching a stuffed dolphin so tight its stuffing threatened to burst. The nurses said she hadn't spoken since admission. Captain Jack didn't push. He sat on the floor beside her bed, back against the wall, legs crossed like he was waiting for a tide to turn. After 10 minutes of silence, he pulled a single seashell from his pocket, held it up to the light. This little beauty came from an island where the sand sings when the wind blows just right. He placed it gently in her palm. Close your eyes and listen. Maybe it'll sing for you too. Zara didn't close her eyes at first, but after a while her fingers curled around the shell. She lifted it slowly to her ear. Captain Jack waited. Then, so softly it was almost lost under the beeping machines, she whispered, "I hear it. It's like waves." He smiled under the brim of his hat. "That's the ocean telling you, we're not alone." From the night on, Zara started talking in small bursts at first, then longer sentences. She asked for stories about dolphins that rescued sailors, asked if pirates ever had pets. Captain Jack answered every question with the patience of someone who had nowhere else to be. Word of these quiet victories traveled in both directions. Students from Riverside Middle School began showing up at the hospital after school, not in big groups, just 2 or 3 at a time with permission slips and nervous smiles. They read picture books and played card games and taught the younger patients how to make friendship bracelets out of embroidery floss. The hospital staff set up a small corner in the activity room dubbed the crew quarters, complete with a hand-painted sign that read "All hands on deck." Captain Jack never claimed credit for any of it, but everyone knew the spark had started with him. Meanwhile, the school kept evolving. The administration followed through on their promises. Break times stretched longer. Phones were allowed during lunch as long as they stayed on silent, and a student council was officially formed with real voting power on dress code changes and event planning. Detention logs shrank. Hallway conversations grew louder and freer. Teachers who once walked with shoulders tense and now stopped to chat asked how weekends went and shared their own stories. One history teacher even started a weekly pirate history club where kids learned about real mutinies, not the Hollywood kind but the ones driven by unfair rations, cruel discipline, and stolen wages. Every session ended with the same question: what would you have done if you were on that ship? Captain Jack dropped by the school only once more, about 3 weeks after the courtyard gathering. He didn't wear the full regalia this time, just the coat and hat, no eye patch. He stood at the back of the Pirate History Club meeting, arms crossed, listening as an 11-year-old boy explained how the Articles of Agreement on old pirate ships were basically the first written constitutions, fair rules voted on by everyone. When the boy finished, Captain Jack stepped forward, cleared his throat. "That's right, lad. A ship without fair rules is just a prison with sails. Remember that here on land too." The room went quiet, then erupted in questions. He answered what he could, deflected what he couldn't, then slipped out before anyone could ask his real name. Parents started piecing things together. Not every parent, but enough. A mother whose son had leukemia and whose daughter led the lunch table mutiny planning finally connected the dots. She waited one evening outside the hospital entrance, coat pulled tight against the November chill. When Captain Jack emerged, she stepped into his path. "You're the one, aren't you? The captain." He stopped, looked at her for a long moment, then nodded once. She didn't cry, didn't gush. She just said, "Thank you for giving my boy something to look forward to every week. And thank you for giving my girl the courage to speak up." He touched the brim of his hat. "It was not me, Mom. It was the children themselves. They've got stronger hearts than any of us." She reached into her bag and pulled out a small wooden carving of a tiny ship no bigger than her palm. "My husband made it. He wanted you to have it. Captain Jack took it and turned it over in his rough hands. It's a fine vessel. Tell him thank you. Then he walked into the dark, leaving her standing there with a quiet smile. The hospital itself began to change in small but noticeable ways. The oncology ward started a storytelling hour every Saturday afternoon, open to any child well enough to sit up. Volunteers from the school rotated in reading or telling their own tales. Nurses reported better moods and fewer requests for anxiety meds on those days. One attending physician started documenting the effect, informally noting correlations between positive social interaction and slightly improved vitals. Nothing publishable, yet just enough to make her wonder if connection deserved its own line in the treatment plan. Captain Jack never missed a storytelling hour. He sat in the back row, hat low, letting the kids take center stage. Sometimes a child would point to him mid-story. Ask the captain, he knows better once. He always waved them off, but if pressed he'd share a short yarn about a lighthouse keeper who kept his light burning through the worst gale because he knew someone out there was counting on it. The metaphor wasn't lost on anyone. Winter rolled in, bringing shorter days, colder winds. The bay froze at the edges, boats stayed docked longer. Captain Jack still made his rounds, coat heavier now, scarf wrapped high. One particularly bitter night he arrived to find Alex's room empty. The bed strip, monitors silent. A nurse met him in the hallway, eyes red. He went home today, Jack. Remission. Scans are clear. He's going to be okay. Captain Jack stood motionless for a beat, then let out a long breath that fogged the air. Good lad. Stubborn as a barnacle. The nurse smiled through tears. He left something for you. In Alex's old room on the windowsill sat a folded piece of paper. Captain Jack opened it. A child's drawing, a pirate ship under a bright sun, flags flying high. At the helm stood a figure with an eye patch and a wide grin. Underneath in wobbly letters, thank you for being my captain. See you on the next adventure. Captain Jack folded the paper carefully, tucked it inside his coat next to his heart. He didn't say anything, just turned and walked to the next room where another child waited. Months passed. Spring came late that year, but when it arrived fierce with color and warmth. The school held its first kindness festival, a direct descendant of the mutiny. Booths lined the courtyard, friendship bracelet making, storytelling corner, a pirate ship made of cardboard where younger kids could pose for photos. Captain Jack didn't attend in person. But late that afternoon a package arrived at the main office with no return address. Inside, a dozen small compasses, each engraved with a single word, forward. A note tucked beneath them read, for the crew to keep pointing toward what's right. The principal read it aloud during the assembly. No one needed to ask who sent it. At the hospital the crew quarters grew. Murals appeared on the walls, hand-painted waves, treasure maps of friendly sea creatures. Zara, now walking with a cane instead of a wheelchair, drew the biggest map herself, marking every room as a port of call. She labeled the nurses' station Safe Harbor and the playroom Treasure Cove. When she finished she added one last mark in the corner, a tiny ship labeled Captain's Dock. No one erased it. Captain Jack kept sailing between the two worlds, hospital by night, harbor by day. He never spoke of retirement, never hinted at stopping. Kindness wasn't a mission with an end date, it was a heading course he plotted fresh every morning. The children taught him as much as he taught them resilience, humor, and the fierce beauty of small victories. The school taught him that courage spreads faster than fear when someone shows how it's done. And somewhere in the quiet spaces between stories held hands and changed rules, a single truth settled in deep: no act of kindness ever truly vanishes. It rides the current and finds new shores, carrying new passengers long after the first wave has broken. Captain Jack knew that better than anyone. So he kept showing up, coat salt-crusted, hat low, heart open, because some voyages demand you never drop anchor. The summer of 2026 arrived, sticky and golden, the kind of heat that makes metal railings too hot to touch and turns hospital linens damp within minutes. Captain Jack still came through the sliding doors most evenings, coat slung over one arm, hat pushed back now that the tricorn felt too heavy in the humidity. The staff had long stopped asking questions, they just nodded, let him pass like he belonged there, because in every way that mattered he did. Zara had grown taller, her cane traded for quick, determined steps that echoed down the corridors. She appointed herself unofficial first mate of the crew quarters, organizing game nights, map drawing contests, even a small talent show where kids lip-synced sea shanties or showed off magic tricks learned from YouTube on smuggled tablets. She always saved the last slot for Captain Jack. He never performed on command, but when the lights dimmed and the room quieted, he would lean against a wall, clear his throat, and begin something short, something true. One night he told them about the time he sailed through a squall so fierce the compass spun like a top, yet the crew held course by watching each other's faces instead of the needle. That's how you find north when everything else fails, he finished, looking straight at Zara. By the light in the eyes of the people beside you. The school kept its momentum too. The Kindness Festival became an annual tradition, now in its second year, drawing parents, siblings, even kids from neighboring districts. Cardboard pirate ships gave way to bigger builds, a full-scale foredeck complete with wheel and rigging made from old jump ropes. The student council voted to dedicate half the proceeds to the hospital, buying new games, art supplies, noise-canceling headphones from Re-Days. Every booth carried a small plaque reading, inspired by one quiet captain who reminded us kindness has no rank. Not everything stayed smooth. August brought a rough patch. A funding cut hit the oncology ward hard. Specialized play therapists reduced hours, art supplies rationed, chemotherapy lounge chairs swapped for folding metal ones that creaked with every shift. Parents whispered in hallways, voices tight with worry. The kids felt it too, the air heavier, the laughter shorter. Captain Jack noticed the change the first night he walked in and saw Zara sitting alone on the floor, hugging her knees instead of directing chaos like usual. He didn't say much at first, just sat beside her cross-legged like old times. After a while she spoke, voice small. "They're taking things away again. Not the medicine, but the fun parts." He nodded slow. The sea does that, sometimes pulls back what it gave just to see if you'll fight to keep it." She looked up, eyes fierce despite everything. "Then we fight, right?" He smiled, the kind that crinkled the corners even under the shadow of his hat. "We fight smart, lass. Not with fists, but with stubborn hearts and clever plans." The next evening he arrived with something new, not toys or stories, but a single sheet of paper folded tight. He handed it to Zara without ceremony. "Read it when you're alone." She waited until lights out, slipped under her blanket, flashlight beam trembling as she opened it. Handwritten in careful block letters, a list of ideas, 10 small actionable things the kids could do themselves to bring back some of the joy the budget cuts stole. Organized peer-to-peer story circles, use phones to record messages for new patients, start a wish jar where every kid writes one tiny thing they want most, even if it's just extra pudding. At the bottom in smaller script, one line just for her: "You've got the makings of a fine Captain Z. Lead from wherever you stand." Zara didn't sleep much that night. By morning she had rallied half the ward. They met in hushed tones behind the nurse's station, turning his list into a battle plan. Within a week the peer story circles started every afternoon in the activity room, kids taking turns telling made-up adventures or real memories, whatever felt right. The wish jar appeared on a windowsill decorated with glitter and pirate stickers, notes piling up fast, extra screen time, more visitors, silly hats on rounds, actual treasure hunts through the hallways using clues taped under chairs. The nurses watched amazed, then joined in, slipping extra pudding cups, passing along old coloring books, even sneaking in a Bluetooth speaker for quiet music during infusions. Word leaked to the school. Riverside students caught wind through siblings, cousins, group chats. Within days care packages started arriving, homemade cookies, stacks of construction paper, decks of donated Switch games with handwritten notes, "Tougher than any storm, we've got your back." One 8th grader whose sister spent 3 months in the ward last year organized a weekend bake sale, raised enough to buy 2 new beanbag chairs and a shelf of board books. Captain Jack kept his distance during the daylight efforts. He never showed up at the school, never posed for photos with the donation boxes. But he heard every detail from the kids themselves, who couldn't wait to tell him during his night visits. Zara especially glowed, recounting how the wish jar worked, how one boy wished for everyone to sing happy birthday even if it wasn't Danyon's birthday, and the whole ward belted it out at the top of their lungs, waking the night shift janitor, who joined in with a surprisingly good baritone. September rolled around, school back in session, cooler evenings returning. The funding talk quieted, not because money magically reappeared, but because the small stubborn acts created enough noise, pressure, goodwill that the hospital board reconsidered the cuts. Therapist's hours restored, art cart restocked, lounge chairs upgraded to cushioned recliners. No one called it a victory tied directly to the kids or to Captain Jack, but everyone in the know understood the chain reaction started in a quiet room with one sheet of paper and one child's refusal to accept less. One crisp October night, Captain Jack arrived later than usual, breath fogging as he pushed through the doors. Alex, now fully in remission and back to school part-time, waited in the lobby wearing a hoodie 2 sizes too big. He spotted the captain, froze for a second, then ran forward, arms wide. Captain Jack caught him in a bear hug, lifted him clean off the floor for a heartbeat before setting him down. "You got tall, kid." Alex grinned. "You got old." They both laughed, the sound echoing soft against the tile. Alex pulled a small cloth pouch from his pocket, dumped its contents into Captain Jack's palm, a handful of sea glass polished smooth by years of waves, greens, blues, milky whites. "Found these on the beach last weekend. Thought you'd like 'em." Captain Jack turned each piece over slow, like examining rare gems. "Fine treasure indeed. Worth more than gold some days." Alex shifted feet, suddenly shy. "I told my class about you. Not everything, just that there's this guy who shows up, makes sick kids feel like they can do anything. They want to meet you. Maybe come talk or something." Captain Jack looked down at the sea glass, then back at the boy. "Some stories work best when they stay half in the shadows, lad. Keeps the magic alive. But tell your class this, tell them the real treasure isn't the captain, it's the crew." Every hand on deck, every voice raised, every heart refusing to quit. "That's what changes the course." Alex nodded, serious, like he understood more than his years should allow. "I will. Promise." Later that night, after Alex left, Captain Jack sat with Zara in the crew quarters. She showed him the latest wish jar entry someone had written, simply "more nights like tonight." He read it twice, then tucked it back inside. "Good wish," he murmured. "Worth fighting for." Zara leaned against his shoulder, quiet for a long time. Then, almost too soft to her, "Thank you for not giving up on us." He rested his chin on top of her head just once. "Never was a question of giving up, lass. Only a question of how far we'd sail together." The years blurred after that, not in a rush but in steady, gentle waves. Captain Jack grew a little slower, the coat a little heavier, but the visits never stopped. New kids arrived, new stories spun, new hands held. The school kept its kindness alive, festivals growing bigger, murals spreading to other walls, student council seats fought over, not for power but for the chance to do more. The hospital named the activity room the Jack's Par after arguments about whether to use his full title or just the first name everyone knew him by. He pretended to grumble when he heard, but those who knew him caught the small proud tilt of his head. Through it all, the truth stayed simple. One man chose quiet compassion over spotlight, chose showing up over showing off, chose children over credit. That single choice didn't fix the world, didn't cure every illness, didn't erase every unfair rule. But it proved something stronger. It proved kindness isn't a soft thing to be pitied, it's a force, sharp, steady, unstoppable when enough hearts catch the same wind. And somewhere out on the bay, when the moon hangs low and the water turns silver, Captain Jack still walks the docks, coat flapping, hat low, compass in his pocket pointed always forward. He doesn't look back to see the wake he leaves, because he knows it's there, carrying stories, courage, hope to shores he may never walk. Some voyages, he once told a wide-eyed child, don't need a destination. They just need a heading worth keeping. So if Captain Jack's story hit you the way it hit those kids and those teachers, then you already know what comes next. One quiet act of kindness can start a wave that reaches places no one expected. It doesn't need cameras or hashtags or big budgets, just someone willing to show up and care when it matters most. Right now, somewhere, a child is waiting in a hospital bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering if anyone out there remembers them. Somewhere, a school is tightening rules until the air feels thick with unfairness and kids are too afraid to speak. And somewhere, a regular person like you or me is thinking, maybe I could do something small, but hesitating because it feels too little, too quiet. Don't wait for permission. Don't wait for the perfect moment. Start where you stand. Visit someone who's lonely, hold a hand, listen to a story without checking your phone. Speak up when something feels wrong, not with anger but with steady, calm truth, like Captain Jack did. Teach a kid that their voice matters, show up for the people who can't show up for themselves. Small, consistent kindness isn't flashy, but it's the strongest current there is. If this story moved you, share it. Tell one person. Pass it to a friend, a teacher, or a parent. Let it ripple. Because every time someone hears about a captain who chose compassion over credit, another heart gets brave enough to do the same. And that's how real change sails forward, one hand held, one story told, one stand taken at a time. You don't have to be a captain to change the course. You just have to decide you're a part of the crew. So what's your next heading? Go find it. The kids are waiting and so is the world.